This is sad to say it's unconventional, but being human and connecting as humans is actually one of the most unconventional things. Corporations have a really hard time doing this, and that's what makes it unconventional.
Hello and welcome to the Health Tech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas. Thank you to you for listening today. If this is your first time, you can subscribe on any of your favorite podcast apps, or you can find us on YouTube as well. Also, a big thank you to our sponsors, the wonderful people at HIMSS, the leading healthcare technology association, and also to our new sponsors, our new friends at Healthcare Now Radio, which is a 24/7 radio show and also a podcast syndication network. Check them out. Today, I'm joined by Brittany Quemby and John Lynn from Swaay Health. Swaay Health is the marketing community, the healthcare and healthcare technology marketing community that's been connecting professionals for over 14 years. I'm sure many of you have been to their events, subscribe to their content, and know John, Brittany, and Colin well. Colin is also the founder of Healthcare IT Today, which has been going for about 20 years. We're going to dive deep today in how healthcare technology buying has evolved and why it's harder than ever to reach the buyers. And we're also going to talk about the marketing tactics that seem to work the best, the ones that don't seem to work as well as they used to, and what some of the emerging trends are in how to reach these buyers. And reaching these buyers is harder than it's ever been because they're dealing with so many more issues. And we're going to talk a lot about the issues that they're facing. I think you'll really enjoy hearing John and Brittany's perspective on that. So with this, let's get on with the show. Brittany and John, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you. Been waiting to do this for a long time. And so it's just great to have you both on the show. Let's just dive right in. I think, most of the people listening to this know you guys know about Swaay, but, they might not know the backstory on how Swaay got started and how it's evolved. I mean, do you want to take a lead on that, Jonathan? I mean, you are, as it says in your bottom lower third there, you are the founder.
Yeah, no, it's been quite a journey. And it's funny because whenever I go to a conference, I'm hanging out with different people and maybe someone they know is there and they go to introduce me and I never know how they're going to introduce me. Because we have Healthcare IT Today, which is our health IT publication, which is 20 years old in December. And then we have Swaay Health, which is our marketing community, our healthcare marketing community, which I think is about 14 years old, something like that. And so I never know, are they going to introduce me as Swaay or are they going to introduce me as Healthcare IT Today? And it's always funny when they kind of, he leads this amazing healthcare marketing community. He's a healthcare marketing expert. And I'm like, wait, I'm actually a tech guy by background. So the story behind it is Healthcare IT Today was our health IT publication. We've done a ton of content around EHR, meaningful use, been successful writing about that. And one day, one of my advertisers came and was like, hey, is there a healthcare B2B marketing conference? And I'm like, sorry, there isn't. Haven't seen it. There might be. I've never seen it. Right. And she's like, well, you should start it and I'll be the first to attend. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I went up to another, in fact, actually a colleague that worked with Brittany as well, Julia Goebel. And I said, hey, Julia, I'm thinking about starting this conference, marketing for companies like yours. Oh, when is it? I want to go. And I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're on to something. So long story short, about 14 years ago, we started. It was originally called HitMic before it was called Swaay and rebranded.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Health. Yeah, it's a healthcare and IT marketing community, which was great for SEO, but maybe not as great when you want provider organizations to come. So yeah, that was kind of how it was born, is just the community coming together and saying, we need this. Why isn't there this? And I was like, okay, I guess that's what I am at my core as a creator. So I went and created it.
That's great. And Brittany, when did you join John and Colin?
I joined 2019, so probably the fall before the pandemic. And I had known John previously because at my previous company, we were a sponsor of one of his events at HIMSS. So we had done some, business together before that, and then jumped ship and came over to work with him and Colin.
Great. Yeah. The Swaay community is just really special. It's not just special within our community of healthcare marketers, but I just think it's a special community. There's a sort of a vibe, a friendliness and openness. And I've been, I think, 3 or 4 times now. And I so look forward to it. I just think you created something truly unique and special.
It's interesting you say that, Adam, because I was just scrolling LinkedIn before we hopped on to record. And, 2 people from the Swaay community drove an 1.5-hour drive to a nothing town to meet up because they just missed each other and they wanted to connect. And it's like, that's those connective ties, between community members is what's special.
That's really very, very special. Okay. Today we're going to talk about, what you guys see as the key trends in healthcare technology. Let's start with the buyer. And I'm just really kind of curious to hear from you guys is like, what do you see changing? Like, who is the healthcare technology buyer today? Who's involved in the process, and how's that changed over the last few years?
I mean, I think the big change I see is that the CIO has gone from being kind of this administrative leader that just keeps the lights on, keeps the network going, make sure you have a PC, that the servers are running, right? Like that's what the CIO used to be, to now being much more strategic. In fact, I think most CIOs want to get out of the data center business and want to get out of the infrastructure business because they want to focus on technologies that can actually influence the business of that organization. So I'd say that's been the biggest shift that we've seen from a CIO perspective in the leaders. What hasn't changed is the fact that 10 people all want to be involved in the decision making with health IT. And maybe that's the only change there is it used to be 5 people. Now it's 10, it's probably gotten worse. The committees have gotten larger. More people are interested in what's happening with IT. So that maybe, I guess, has grown larger, but the fact that it's committee driven, that any of these 10 people can all ruin a deal if they don't know about your organization, who you are you trusted? Do you understand what it means to work in healthcare? If they don't understand that, then, they can all say, nope, sorry, I've never heard of this company. And they can literally ruin, you having a deal and having that organization purchase your product. The other thing that I think is really interesting right now, and this is somewhat more of the current state, which is all of them are suffering through major cost pressures and along with that uncertainty. So whether it's the Medicaid cuts, whether it's the supplies costing more, whether it's the staff costing more, whether it's, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of those cost pressures are now telling CIOs, we're only going to spend, what we have to. And if it doesn't have a very clear ROI, don't even talk to us about it. So I think that's the other thing that's kind of more localized to the current moment, but that's what everyone's feeling right now. It's like, if it wasn't on the budget, if it wasn't on the strategic plan, then right now you're in the education state. So that a year from now, 2 years from now, when budgets free up a bit and when they improve, they could actually purchase your product.
I 100% agree. And we've seen this with clients particularly in the last year, where clients, if they don't have a clear ROI story, or if there's not a clear connection with the trend towards AI, they're in real trouble. And we've seen it with clients and we can actually frankly see it in the conversions that we're able to get, where there's a good ROI story or there's a good AI part of the story. The business, you can generate demand for them. Where there isn't, it's like we've really struggled with getting conversions for them. So yeah, I know what you mean. What do you think are the biggest pain points for these buyers these days? I mean, you've talked about that. What are the 1 or 2 things that are keeping them up at night?
Yeah, I mean, certainly cost pressure is a huge pain point. What's also interesting is there's 2 things that probably dominate, maybe 3 things that dominate the leadership's, issues right now. One is security. That's what keeps them up more than anything else. I know a number of CIOs are like, I don't want to go back to CIO because I don't want the 3 a.m. wake up call that we've had a breach. Like that, this is a real concern for many organizations, and it's not a problem you can fully solve. Like, it's not something where you're like, okay, if you give me $10 million to invest in security, I'm going to be fine. And I don't have to, worry about sleeping at night. You can invest 10 million and still be breached. So that's the biggest one. The second one to me is AI, and to your point, like, how do you tie it into AI? But the pressure is different for a CIO. The pressure for them is this, and it's a classic IT situation, which is there is no all-in-one AI product that I could just choose from these 5, and they all do every AI solution that I need for my healthcare organization. Right now, we're in what we call a best of breed world, where there's an AI solution for radiology and one for RCM and one for clinical and one for revenue cycle and one for, in fact, and then within each of those categories, say revenue cycle, there's one that's best for, small balances. There's one that's best for prior auth. And there's one that's, and so like these CIOs are saying, man, where do I start? Do I go with some best of breed because I need to understand what's happening with AI? But, I really wish I could just have an all-in-one, that I could just buy one AI solution and boom, I have all of my AI solutions right there. And we've been through this before, by the way. Like, this is what happened before Epic and Cerner and Meditech took over the world, right? I guess Oracle Health, not Cerner. Like, before they did, you would buy one lab system and one EHR and one pharmacy and one, you had all these systems. And then eventually Epic created Beaker and they created a pharmacy solution. And so they created all the solutions. They're like, wait, why do we have 4 solutions? That's not effective. That's tough to manage, a lot of finger pointing. And so they just wanted to buy one. And so then they eventually just bought the Epic or Meditech or whatever solution they bought, right? And so we're going through that same cycle. And so it's really hard for CIOs right now to know, should I buy that point AI solution because it's going to make an impact, or should I wait for an all-in-one solution, or even does Epic or the EHR Meditech become the all-in-one AI solution for me in that category? So I think that's maybe one of the biggest challenges with AI is, how do I do this? Best of breed is where we're at. There is no all-in-one. So how long do I wait for that all-in-one solution? Yeah. And then the third one is actually optimizing the EHR. People don't want to talk about it because they're like, oh, haven't we talked about EHR forever? But guess what? 90% of what someone does in an organization is the EHR. So they're like, hey, I would love to implement all sorts of other solutions, but I need to optimize my EHR. I've spent $100 million, $1 billion on it, whatever it is, depending on the size. So yeah, I think that's the other major focus for them.
Yeah. I love that. I think you really nailed it in terms of the 3 big issues. What about sources of trust? I mean, what are their sources of trust for all of this? Brittany, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure John can probably talk a little bit better than I can, but, I think that they have close net folks who they rely on and trust. So whether it's other CIOs that they're, talking to, or a close community that they're actually speaking with, and those are the people that they actually trust the most, or someone like a trusted partner, like, someone who, like John, who is within the space, or another person who is in the space that knows what's going on. They are trusting those people who are there on the ground, who are actually encountering what they're encountering on an everyday basis.
I think you're so right. I mean, the first people they're going to talk to are the people that they know. But I think it's so interesting. You kind of raise an issue there with, like, John, we'll talk about you like you're not in the room with us. But I think it's interesting because you are, you like a lot of influencers in the space. You play multiple roles. You're a friend, you have relationships, you know a lot of these people, but you also have a media company. And so you're both a trusted source as a person, but also in terms of the brand of who you represent. And I think there's this very interesting shift going on in the media landscape or the influencer landscape of that blurry line between an individual being an influencer. Bill Russell's obviously another example of that. Ed Marks is another example. And the media brand at the same, it being a key part of that as well.
It's interesting you say that. I was recently doing a presentation to a hospital association board, and I told them, I said, hey, everyone's a sponsor of us, so I'm biased to everyone. Which is somewhat true, right? Like to some degree. But here's how we look at it. People don't care so much if it's sponsored or not. As long as you're transparent about it, which I think is important, like be transparent about any biases that could exist. But at the end of the day, people just want you to share something that's valuable. So if the content that you share is valuable, if the discovery of a solution is valuable, then they don't care so much who's paying for it and who's not. And so, that's what we found is if we focus on providing value to that IT buyer, that, IT leader, then things work out when in that regard, right? So I think that's the really interesting part, as far as like, why do they trust us? It's because we keep providing value. And if we don't provide value, then they won't trust us anymore, right? We're not going to be influential. We're not going to be influencers. So I think that's the big thing for us is like, how do you provide value? But I'll tell you, it is changing dramatically. To Brittany's comment, there is this kind of network of CIOs and peers who connected, and they have text groups where they're sharing information and they're connecting with each other at Chime conferences and HIMSS conferences and all the various events, right? At user conferences, that's an amazing place as well. But what's interesting, I was talking to an older CIO, former CIO, now is selling consulting services, and he said something interesting to me. He's like, John, I don't think the next generation of CIO is as connected with their peer group as my peer group was. And he's like, why is that? And so I've been pondering it since he asked that. And my reaction as I've kind of thought through that is that, and actually it was even my gut reaction when I responded to him, I was like, you know what? I don't think they value it as much because during your time as CIO, the only way for you to discover what products were trending, what products were available was to go to a conference. It was to, get that magazine mailed to you, or was to call up your CIO friend and see what they're doing and what they've discovered. Now the information is so readily available to CIOs, whether it's through search or whether it's through publications or whether it's through videos, that they can literally watch the product without even talking to a salesperson. I know you've talked about this a lot, Adam. Everyone's going upstream. Once they hit your website, they've already done their due diligence, right? And then, throw in, of course, generative AI. The CIO at their fingertips can say, give me 10 companies that do this, and generative AI is going to give them 10 companies. So they don't need to rely on their network the same way they did previously. I think it's a little too far to say that they don't want a network or that they don't want to create those connections. I think they are, and they still see value. Like once they've got their short list, hey, tell me what your experience was, because your experience is a little different than discovery. But, that is a huge changing dynamic, that the information is so readily available to them that now you don't have to rely on your peer network for discovery as much as you did even 10 years ago.
It's interesting that when I've been in the healthcare IT industry only 15 years, which is quite a long time, but it's not really compared to a lot of people. But the people that I know have known from the start who've been in it, and the ones who've been in it for maybe 10, 15 years before that, what they say when they go to HIMSS is, oh my God, the HIMSS show is now just overwhelming. I mean, I remember when it first got started and they were there at the start, and then it was a much more intimate, it was still pretty large, but it was still an opportunity to network. It was kind of like Swaay is. And so I think that this industry has become so enormous. Those big events actually don't provide the same value in terms of connections that they used to. And so the types of things that you do and that other folks do, even within like what you did at HIMSS, sort of creates a place for connection. And I think that's been missing. Let's just shift on to the access problem, because we're kind of there. I mean, everybody's saying this, right? It is so much harder to reach these buyers. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think healthcare buyers, like anybody, are overwhelmed. I think there's so many solutions, so many vendors, they're getting bombarded with emails or DMs or anything of the like. So they're overwhelmed just like everybody else would be, overwhelmed with everything that's like coming at them on an ongoing basis. And I think, like John said, they're under pressure to do more with less. The cost issue that we talked about, tighter budgets, there's staffing shortages, regulatory changes. I think it's just all coming at them at once. So I think it's harder for these buyers to really kind of nail down what they actually want to, look at or talk to or read. So it really comes down to them being, quite overwhelmed. And, the noise level is high. And I think everyone can say that. And now everybody is looking, to be innovative, and everybody, as we said, want to be AI powered. So buyers kind of tune out a lot of the stuff that's coming at them because it's just so much noise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I hear about one of my colleagues was saying that he was talking with a CIO who said, I think he said 500 emails a day, or it was something crazy. It was certainly like that. It's like, there's no way they're going to get to, even, an email that could save their lives. They're never going to get to, they're never going to see it. It is a real problem. And that's why brand is so important, because if they don't know who you are from the start of the process, the chances of you being able to interrupt that process halfway through are pretty remote. But what do you guys, I mean, Brittany and John, I mean, you see so many different vendors and so many different marketing ideas from various companies. What do you see is working and things that are maybe not working the way that they used to?
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in, and then John can chime in because he gets, millions of pitches as well. So I think he knows what works best for him. But, I think being personal works. I think storytelling works. I think, having respect for the person or having trust for the person works as well. Just dumping a whole bunch of pitches to somebody or, a whole bunch of email blasts out to people is definitely not going to work. People aren't going to resonate with that. It feels lazy. It feels impersonal. I think really trying to get to know somebody and realize what makes them tick, and then utilize that information to then really kind of build a relationship and build trust with someone works well. I think that's kind of where you need to start for sure.
And what about things like podcasts? Do you think they work out, or are they getting overplayed?
I mean, I do. I think they work as long as you're giving them something of value to the listener. There's a lot of niche podcasts out there, but there's a lot of authentic ones that are not self-promotional that I think work. I think when it's just another company who's, building a podcast and they're, talking about features and we've launched this and this is what our product does, that's not going to work. People aren't going to listen to that. Nobody cares about that. It needs to be offer a story, or why would I care to listen to this, and offer something that's authentic that somebody actually wants to listen to.
I had an innovative idea yesterday about a use of a podcast that I wouldn't have thought of. And that was, you might have multiple white papers. You're a vendor and may have multiple white papers. And as a poor CIO, I think, oh God, do I really want to read through, what's going to be 4 16-page white papers? It's like, probably not. And so what they've been doing is they've been using Notebook LM, which is a Google product, to synthesize those and turn them into a podcast. So Notebook LM has this thing where it can actually create a podcast. I've actually used it before. It's not, it doesn't have the authenticity of a real podcast like this. It doesn't and ah. It doesn't have people talking over each other or sort of, hesitating and that sort of thing. It's a little too polished and a little too slick, but it's a very good way to synthesize something. So you could take what they've done is take the 4 white papers and turned it into a podcast discussion between these 2 people that probably lasts about 20 minutes. And I thought, like, what a clever way to get you to give you a different way of consuming it. So, all right, I'm not going to read this, but I might listen to it for 20 minutes on the drive home. And that's like, oh, okay, that's
That's very cool.
I thought it was cool.
What Notebook needs, though, is an edit function, because occasionally it phrases things just off, right? Where, you're like, if I could just tweak those 3 words, I would be fine with that, because they say, anyway, they phrase it just off. So that's where the fear is. I can't wait for those auto-generated podcasts to then allow you to tweak the specific verbiage, because it should. I mean, that was easy to just do that, right? To create the audio and tweak that audio section so that it is 100% accurate rather than 98% accurate.
He also told me they use 11 Labs for text to audio. Basically, you take a text and you turn it into audio. And they had
interesting though, Adam, about podcasts is that I think that there's been an explosion of podcasts, which means there's an explosion of content. And so CIOs, I think, are getting more choosy about who they subscribe to. To your point, you have 500 emails. Well, if they're not an email that they're expecting or that they're used to getting, on the daily, and that they're a trusted source that they read regularly, then you're just going to hit the abyss, right? And so they are coming to trust certain brands because there is so much noise. They need brands that will help them cut through the noise and be able to understand, hey, what is relevant? Because I do need to stay up to date as a CIO on what's happening. So I need to find some brands that will help me do that, right? So it's one of the greatest compliments I can get when I talk to a CIO at a conference. And they're like, hey, John, I don't listen to many podcasts, but I listen to yours, right? It's like, and I think it is that whole point where it's like, hey, Healthcare IT Today is a trusted brand of what we call our daily cup of health IT, of what they need to know. And so I think that's, an interesting evolution of this, which is that, hey, I do want the content, but I need it from a trusted brand. The other thing I'd add in this conversation is that people, similar to patients, we don't want to call in. We don't want to do, we want self-service, right? We want online self-scheduling that I can just self-service, do what I need to do and get done and get out of it, right? Well, CIOs are in the same boat. They want self-service as well. They don't want to get I hear him say, I could have as many lunches as I want, but then I'm committed 2 to 3 hours with a salesperson. And they don't want that commitment, right? They don't want to go to a dinner that's 3 hours. That might be this amazing dinner, right? But they're like, they don't want it. That's not effective use of their time. And so, I think for them, it's saying, I need some self-service ability to be able to learn about and vet. And so that's why podcasts, videos, demos, even white papers. Some people do like white papers, Adam, they love the written content.
Don't get me wrong. The white papers are great. I mean, we produce a lot of them, so I certainly don't want to disparage them. Yeah. Video. What about video? You guys, really doubled down on it. I thought what you did at HIMSS was wonderful. Wait, talk about what, because some people who haven't been at HIMSS may not be aware with it, but I thought the setup that you had was terrific.
We had 3 studios in our booth at HIMSS where we invited clients to come participate, where we had long form interviews that were curated and questions were curated between us and the client, where John and Colin would interview our clients. And then we had one studio where we had our short videos where folks could come and talk about some of the trends and thought leadership that's kind of going on within health IT on camera. So we had kind of a slew of people through these 3 studios throughout 3 or 4 days. But it really, there was a hustle and bustle about it, but it really kind of made a lively booth for us and kind of people who were passing by and people who were joining us to get on camera to kind of highlight, an executive or maybe a partner or a customer, or maybe just wanting to get on camera, short snippet to kind of talk about some of the trends that they're seeing even on the floor at HIMSS or within the space.
I thought it was brilliant.
Next year, we're going even bigger. We added to the size of our booth. So we're going to be doing all the same stuff Brittany described, the long form videos with that are largely our sponsored content with vendors, and then the shorter stuff that we share on social media. But we're also going to have, and Brittany can slap me later if this is too early to announce it, but we're working on some sort of Swaay Health lounge area where people can come in the Swaay Health community could, be part of our booth as well and take part in it. We may even include a wall of different sponsors and different things like that, where they could either scan a QR code or do something like that. Anyway, that part's still under development. But anyway, we're going even bigger to bring all of the marketing people together, but also to broadcast the messages of the health IT communities. Because it's great. I mean, if you're at HIMSS, there's 25,000 people or something now that go to HIMSS, but they're all busy doing all sorts of things. So even if they're at HIMSS, they're not seeing it. And there's a bunch of people that can't even make it to the conference. And so that's the value we create is, hey, your customers are there. Let's capture their story and then broadcast it after the event so that even people that were at HIMSS that didn't get to see your message, didn't see your company, can now, be able to hear what you were saying at the conference.
That's a brilliant idea.
And I think the lounge also, we want to bring people together as we do with Swaay. But as you mentioned earlier, Adam, with HIMSS, it can be daunting. Some people go and they don't know who to meet. They don't know where to go. And they're kind of just wandering the exhibit hall aimlessly. This is kind of like a home base where you know that at least you'll see someone from, the Swaay community that you could then chat with and maybe tag along and do the exhibit hall together type thing.
Well, it's also great, I think, for folks like myself, who are roving, just to have a meeting point. Say, hey, I'll meet you at the Swaay booth. It's just, I think that's brilliant. Really, really brilliant. So, we've talked a lot about events. We've talked about podcasts, word, video. What are the other forms of content, do you think, that are really resonating? And what do you see as some of the changes that are going on in the uses of content?
Yeah, I think we talk about short form content, long form content. I think there's a place for both, because I think there are people who still love white papers. There are people who love short videos, long videos. So I think there's a place for both of them and a time for both of them, because I think some people are consuming differently. I do think that there's some interesting things, and we're looking to actually do something like this coming up, is real peer-driven conversation. So, we do it at Swaay from a conference perspective, but really maybe trying to do some of that virtually. So we're looking to host one with our client, an unwebinar. So like similar, like an unconference, where it's really driven by the attendees and by the peers coming with their questions. What are you experiencing? How are you doing this? How did you fail? Or what did you do when you failed? How did you win? And really just driving those conversations, but, from a peer-driven perspective. So we're actually launching one this week, and we're doing an unwebinar with one of our clients, and really kind of honing in on what we do in the unconference at our annual conference, but virtually.
Love it. That's great. It's a little bit like, what we've been doing with the Health Tech Marketing Network, which is a similar community. I think they're very complementary and I think work well together. But that sort of giving a forum, having a topic is very important, but then having a forum and facilitating the conversation amongst peers is so valuable. I find that we just, as a firm, it's like having an ongoing focus group. It's like, okay, what do we need to be doing? What do we need to be to stay fresh and current? And when it comes to content, I do think that there's a clear understanding of the value of thought leadership. I feel that thought leadership is probably more important than it has ever been, because of that need to get your brand and the value of what you do in front of the buyers all the time, so that before they start their process, they've heard of you. And thought leadership has a lot to do with that. And it's so much to do with having different formats. So you're going to need that 16-page white paper for the people who need it. Also, they're going to need it because they're loading it into ChatGPT to analyze it. It's sort of like, it's almost like it becomes like data fodder into the engines, but then versioning of that out into different formats like thought leadership ads on LinkedIn. So I do think it has its role. And, so what about social? I mean, we're funny. John and I had a bit of a chat back and forth today on LinkedIn about LinkedIn. I'm curious to know what you guys think about what's going on with LinkedIn.
Yeah, I'll chime in, since we did have that, ironically, that's the best part of social, is when you can have those discussions with people, right? And when you can disagree in a non-disagreeable way, right? Like in a friendly way, right? And so I actually think that the challenge is there's a lot of content. That's true, right? The volume of content that's going to people has gone through the roof. People are sharing all sorts of things. And so, if I'm a brand today and I'm thinking about how should I leverage the various social channels, I would focus on pillar content that adds extreme value. So that, like, how can you provide real big value that creates a lasting impact? And so form and all that, that's a whole other discussion, right? Like, what is the right way to do it? Because to Brittany's point, right, the CIO might just see the short video passing through their LinkedIn, and that might be all they have time for. But their executive that's in charge of making the purchase decision needs the white paper to deep dive, right? So, I think that was really insightful from Brittany in that regard, right? But to me, LinkedIn is taking over the B2B game. Twitter has flattened. I don't think it will go down anymore. I think it's where it's at. And so there is still some audience there, or X, I guess is what it's officially called, but I'm old school, so it's still Twitter to me. But, so that's flattened. Blue Sky's never taken off. Some of the others haven't taken
Reddit. Reddit has become increasingly influential because of the AI overviews. Apparently, it has an inordinate amount of influence on the answer engines.
And if you want an answer, go to Reddit. If you want a real answer and real people talking and having a conversation, similar to like how we kind of do on social, but I think social has become a little bit more noisy. But yeah, if you want a real answer of people and having a real conversation, go to Reddit.
Just be careful marketing on it, because they will hurt you if you don't do it the right way.
Oh yeah. Yeah, boy, that'll blow up on your face and then some. Absolutely. But as you guys looking ahead, what do you think are some of the important trends that listeners to this podcast should be thinking about, particularly around marketing?
Yeah, I'm not sure where it's all going to go, because the noise is so loud on social. That's fair. And with AI generated content, I think we're going to go to the trusted content curator even more. So that's going to become stronger. It's funny. I first heard Mark Cuban say that phrase about 10 years ago, when social was starting, where it's like, hey, people are going to want these trusted content curators. Well, now I think it's even more so the case with AI created content, because they want to know what is real and what is not. And so to me, that's one trend, is who's the trusted curators that I'm going to go to understand it. But I think the other challenge that we face is that there's so many people doing, and I would call them kind of these dinners. And I hear it from CIOs where they're like, John, I can't go to another dinner. Like, I'm kind of burnt out by that, right? And sure, it's nice to get together with peers. It's nice to have a nice meal, but they're expressing, and there's a lot of people doing this. And sometimes the sponsors strike it rich, right? And the alignment is good, and they needed their solution, and they got the conversation they wanted. And so sponsors are willing to pay for it, and there's enough of them, right? What was it, 1,300 vendors at HIMSS, right? Like, there's enough vendors. You only have 1 to 3 sponsors per dinner, right? Like, that's a lot of dinners you could hold, right? That they're willing to do it. But what I'm hearing is it's somewhat saturated. So where it's like, hey, there's almost too many, and I don't know what to do, right? There's so many conferences, there's so many events that, I think people are getting more choosy in what they do. And so I actually see the same trend happening with health IT vendors, where they're saying, let's go all in on a couple of events, and maybe even some local events where I get more face time with individuals, as opposed to, hey, I've got to be everywhere so that everyone can see me, so I have every option. So maybe that's a trend I see as well.
I was going to say, I totally agree. I think people are wanting to go to these much more regional conferences where they can connect a little bit better than these big conferences. I also think there's going to be a kind of, not a resurgence, because I think they've still been around, but of the newsletter, because I think people are so overwhelmed with the noise on social that it's like you can't keep up, and there's so much content, and you get on and you're overwhelmed because there's so much. What did I miss? What did I not intake? So having kind of, as John said, a trusted curated content person or curator, I can't even remember what you said, but having a newsletter that's going to curate that content for me and come to me via email that I can look at and realize what I need to read, what I should be paying attention to, is going to be a trend, because I think a lot of people are kind of stepping back from being on social media all the time because it's so noisy all the time.
Yeah, John, your digest on Saturday mornings, I think, is brilliant. I think it's also brilliant you're doing it on Saturday, not Sundays, because Sundays is now everybody's doing what Anne Handy, that's it, thing of like sending it out first thing on Sunday morning. I mean, we're guilty of doing that, but I think you're smart doing it on Saturday, because nobody else sends them on Saturday. Yeah. We've got a closing question, a 2-part closing question for both of you. So it's, if you could help listeners to this build a go-to-market plan, sort of a 3-point go-to-market plan, what would that be? And including that something which is an unconventional tactic.
Brittany, you're the marketing plan expert. You should lead on this.
I mean, I think it kind of goes back to some of the stuff we said before. I think I would build something that is really built on peer-driven stories or customer advocacy or customer stories, something that, people really are interested in and will consume. Obviously, nobody really cares about your features, but they really want to know the why and why it's helped them and what it's done to, make life easier, or, what are the success that they had, using your product. So I think really honing in on those kind of stories and the why behind it is really important. But I also think creating multiple formats is super important. I think we've talked about in this call, some people like the deeper dive, some people like the snackable. I think you kind of have to have a melange of formats, but really have an authentic voice around those formats, because if not, people aren't going to listen. People can see through the fakeness. They can see through that. They really want a kind of trusted, authentic, almost unpolished voice. I know in corporate you have to be a little bit more polished, but, really being an authentic voice, behind the formats and the contents that you're building.
Great. John, you want to build on that?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating what she just said. It's amazing how many people now, when they're like, oh, there was a little screw up in the video, I was like, guess what? That means it's more authentic. Leave it. It's actually good. As long as it's not incorrect, that's a different story. I actually think it's a very tough question, Adam, because the answer really depends upon where you are in the market and what the culture of your organization is. And let me give a few examples. For example, if you're a very sales-driven organization, then that means your marketing team is all about sales enablement. Then I need one strategy, which is, how do I help enable the sales team with customer testimonials, whether that's videos or whether that's case studies or whether that's other assets that are going to help the salespeople do it. And maybe I go to conferences where the salespeople are introduced to people, and I do the smart meetings, right? The hosted buyer stuff that's happening all over the place. That's maybe more of a sales-driven organization. If I'm an organization that does have a big marketing presence and wants to be a leader and is looked to as a leader in the industry about what's happening, well, then maybe I can do more of a content-based approach, which is around thought leadership and telling people what they need to know so that they act in a certain way. And so, then my tactics would be very different where, hey, I do want to launch my own newsletter and I do want to launch my own podcast, or I want to leverage a whole bunch of other podcasts and be on their podcast so that my thought leaders are out there telling the market stuff and educating the market on things that they wouldn't know, right? So, that would be the tactic that would be better for them. If you're a company that everyone knows and they just think they understand you, but they don't, you'd probably take a different tactic, right? So I think you have to understand the culture of your organization, and you also have to understand how you've approached marketing in the past and where do you want to go in the future. So it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but to offer one unconventional tactic to your question, this is sad to say it's unconventional, but being human and connecting as humans is actually one of the most unconventional things. Corporations have a really hard time doing this, and that's what makes it unconventional. Just that fact of reaching out to someone on a human level and connecting as humans, not as, hey, I want to sell you something. You'll be shocked how many sales will result of connecting to humans. And this is true whether you're reaching out on LinkedIn and you see someone that, their mom passed away and you just reach out as a human and you connect with them on that, right? Or you see that they're doing a conference and you send them a compliment, right? That's what humans do. We comfort each other, we support each other, we compliment each other. And that same is true as a conference, right? You can do that same thing on the human level, is hey, let's have fun together and let's connect. And then you'll be surprised that they'll be like, hey, I love you. What do you do? That's a different conversation than, hey, what do you do? Right? So I think that's the unconventional, is how many human connections can you create? And by the way, here's the most simple. This is the walking by someone and smiling to give them something nice, is just smiling at them. Liking someone's piece of content, resharing someone's piece of content, commenting on it. That's the smile of social media.
Well, I think that's a great place to bring this discussion to a close. Brittany and John, I thank you for taking the time with me today, but also thank you for creating and fostering the community that you've done. You've made, for people like me, who are fairly new to healthcare technology marketing. I only started Health Launch about 5.5 years ago. And I felt like I found home the first time I came to a Swaay event. And I know everybody else feels that way. So thank you for doing that.
Well, we appreciate that, Adam. I mean, it's a joy for us to be part of the community as well, right? Like, I mean, we enjoy being part of it and the blessing of being around so many amazing people. And so, yeah, and it's people like you that make that experience great for everyone that's there. So thank you for all you do to connect with people and to support them.
Thank you. I so enjoyed that conversation with John and Brittany. They really shine an interesting light on the issues that we're facing. And I love their ideas and perspectives. I've got 3 key takeaways from this. First of all, healthcare buyers have fundamentally changed. Today's CIOs are more strategic than ever, and they're also overwhelmed. They're dealing with massive cost pressures, increasing security concerns, and the challenges of navigating AI solutions in this fragmented best breed market. And then the buying committees have grown from 5 people to 10 people or more. And so getting consensus is harder than it's ever been. The second thing is that traditional discovery methods seem to be breaking down. So while older CIOs used to rely heavily on peer networks and conferences for product discovery, the modern CIO has information at their fingertips, and they're facile with using the new tools like ChatGPT and Claude and the other generative AI tools to do the research in much more effective ways. This means the role of networking has shifted from discovery to validation, and brands need to work really hard to be findable online before the buying process has even started. The third is that authentic human connection is now the most unconventional marketing tactic. There are very few companies that have an authentic voice and are really good at connecting with their buyers. So in a world where we're drowning with AI-generated content and automated outreach, simply connecting as humans, whether that's through genuine LinkedIn interactions, peer-driven stories, or unpolished, authentic content, this is the stuff that cuts through the noise more effectively than many sophisticated marketing campaigns. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I enjoyed talking with John and Brittany. I have a favor to ask. If you enjoyed the show, give us a thumbs up on YouTube or a positive rating on whatever podcast application you use. You also might want to forward this to any of your friends or colleagues in the industry. One thing to think about is that if you wanted a sounding board on any of the issues that you're dealing with, I'd love to speak with you. You can book a call with me through the link down below. Don't worry, it's not a sales call. We can just have a chat. I'd love to talk to you about the challenges that you're facing. So with that, I want to bid you farewell and look forward to seeing you on the next episode.